a day later, you look back and think, what was I possibly thinking? Yeah, we've all been there. Well, according to the book, The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli, those moments aren't just random oopsies. They're actually predictable glitches in our mental software. So let's dive in and take a look at some of the most common ways our brains lead us astray pretty much every single day.
You know, this whole idea really got started for the author when he was chatting with Nassim Taleb. You might know him from his book, The Black Swan. And they had this aha moment where they realized, hey, these thinking errors, they're not just for regular people. They trip up everybody. We're talking CEOs, experts, Nobel Prize winners, you name it. It's just a fundamental, kind of quirky part of being human.
Okay, so before we get into some of the really wild examples, let's just make sure we're on the same page. What exactly is a cognitive error anyway?
The most important word to focus on here is systematic. See, these aren't just one-off mistakes or bad days. The author calls them routine mistakes. They are predictable patterns that our brains just fall into over and over again. So you can think of them less like bugs in the system and more like, well, built-in features of our evolutionary hardware.
All right, let's get into our first major glitch. This one completely messes with how we see the world and, honestly, our own chances of making it big. It's all about the incredibly powerful illusion of success.
The book kicks this chapter off with a wonderfully weird question. Why on earth should you go visit cemeteries? It's a brilliant, maybe a little morbid way to set up our first big cognitive error, which is called survivorship bias.
So, meet Rick. We all know a Rick, right? He's that musician who made it. The startup founder on the cover of a magazine, the best-selling author. He's the one we see everywhere because he's the success story. He is the triumphant survivor.
And this right here perfectly shows the core of the problem. We see the one winner, Rick, up on stage, but what we don't see is the massive, invisible graveyard of failures. All the thousands of bands that practiced for years but never got a record deal, all the writers with manuscripts just collecting dust. See, triumph is loud and visible. Failure is silent and hidden.
So just how big is that graveyard? Well, check out this number. The book estimates that for every single successful musician, there are at least 10,000 others who just didn't make it. And because the media never tells their stories, we end up wildly, and I mean wildly, overestimating our own chances of succeeding.
And this isn't just about the music business. It happens in pretty much any field you can imagine. We hear about the one startup that became the next tech giant, but we never hear about the thousands that went bankrupt. So to fight this bias, you have to force yourself to go and, mentally visit that graveyard of failed projects.
Okay, this next one is really sneaky. It's a trick that advertisers absolutely love to use on us. It's called the swimmer's body illusion, and it's all about getting cause and effect completely backward.
So you see a professional swimmer, right? And you notice their incredible physique. And the obvious thought is, wow, all that intense training must have given them that body. But is that what's really going on?
Well, here's the twist. The book points out that these athletes don't have those amazing bodies because they train so much. They're successful swimmers because they were basically born with that kind of physique to begin with. Their body is a factor for selection, not the result of their training.
Let's think about this another way. Does going to a fancy university like Harvard make you successful? Or does Harvard just do a really good job of selecting the absolute brightest students who were probably going to be successful anyway? The swimmer's body illusion would tell us it's much more of the latter.
So here's the bottom line on this one. We are constantly mistaking the criteria for selection with the actual outcome. So whether you're looking at a university or a new beauty product or a workout plan, you always have to ask yourself, is this thing actually creating a result, or is it just attracting people who already have that quality? All right, on to our third glitch. And believe me, this one is a biggie. This is all about the immense, almost irresistible power of the group, a force that the book calls social proof. The book gives this perfect example. Imagine you're at a street corner and suddenly a bunch of people just stop and stare up at the sky. What do? Come on, you know you'd do it. You'd look up too. That's social proof in action. It's that herd instinct. We just automatically assume that if everyone else is doing something, it must be the right thing to do. It's an ancient survival instinct that can get us into some real trouble in the modern world.
This bias is so powerful, it can literally make us question our own senses. There's this classic psychology experiment by a guy named Solomon Asch that proved just how far we were willing to go just to fit in with the crowd.
So the setup was super simple. A person walks into a room and is asked to do a really easy visual test. Just match a line to one of 3 others. Easy, right? But they were in a room full of actors who were all told to give the same, obviously wrong answer. The big question was, would the one real subject stick to what their eyes were telling them, or would they just fold under the pressure?
The results were pretty shocking. About a third of the time, the subject just caved and gave the wrong answer just to go along with everyone else. It just goes to show you that when we're feeling unsure, we often just outsource our thinking to the group, even when the group is clearly, demonstrably wrong.
Okay, so we've seen how easily our brains can get fooled by survivorship, by selection factors, by social proof. So what in the world are we actually supposed to do about all this?
I just love this analogy from the author. He says we can't stop the storm of our cognitive errors. They're like a permanent part of our mental weather. But by understanding them, by building a kind of mental lightning rod, we can make them a whole lot less dangerous and definitely less worrisome.
And that really is the key takeaway here. The goal isn't to live a perfectly rational, error-free life. Let's be real, that's impossible. These biases are just too deeply wired into our brains. The real win is just in recognizing them when they pop up, in ourselves and in others, and having the tools to maybe counteract their pull just a little bit.
Ultimately, the book's message is just beautifully simple. To improve our lives and our decisions, we don't need some brilliant new invention or a fancy new app. All we really need is just to be a little less irrational.
So as we wrap up, I'll just leave you with this question to chew on. After hearing about just these few glitches, which one feels the most familiar to you? Is it that powerful pull of the crowd, the illusion of success, or maybe that sneaky swimmer's body illusion? Because knowing your own patterns, that's the first and most powerful step you can take toward clearer thinking.
Please do subscribe.